The Titanic now showing intense deterioration 12,000 feet underwater. Divers say the entire deck house is collapsing and destroying staterooms.
Yeah, the headline should be the most unsurprising story of the day. The Titanic, which sank 100 years ago in salt water, is deteriorating. I mean, if we wanted to save it, we could have lifted it. We talked about that, right?
I don't know that that was ever feasible.
Right. No, you put balloons underneath it
Right,
and then lift it up.
Can we raise the Titanic? Should we raise the Titanic? Should resources be spent and lives be risked to recover more of Titanic's artifacts, study more of her mysteries while the wreck still rests in one piece? Or should we let the great ship and each of her 1,500 victims finally rest in peace? My name is Amanda Hoopman, and today we're taking a look at the ethics and logistics of salvage after Titanic. Okay, first questions first. Is it even possible to raise the Titanic? As soon as the week succeeding her sinking, people have been suggesting ways to accomplish the mighty feat. John Jacob Astor IV's son, Vincent Astor, suggested raising her using dynamite. Similarly, Clive Cussler's 1976 novel, Raise the Titanic, and the 1980 film adaptation of the same name, uses tanks of compressed air to blow Titanic to the surface. Over time, people have suggested using ping pong balls, nylon balloons, nylon bags filled with Vaseline, pumping the Titanic full of molten wax or liquid nitrogen that she might float to the surface. The ping pong ball idea seems to stem from a 1949 Donald Duck comic where Donald, Huey, Dewey, and Louie pump a much smaller, shallower shipwreck with ping pong balls to raise it. This isn't quite as silly as it sounds. It's actually possible to raise some wrecks with ping pong balls. The Mythbusters achieved it with a small boat in shallow waters and with much difficulty.
The Mythbusters' bid to salvage a sunken boat using ping pong balls lies in the balance. Suddenly, hundreds of them bob up from below. That could be hours of work floating to the surface.
Oh no!
Titanic 2 has ruptured.
That hole blew out, it seems, from pressure of the ping pong balls.
The Mythbusters are back in business. Before long, Titanic 2 seems to be straining at the leash. Titanic 2 stirs, then slowly rises from her watery grave.
But obviously a ship as large as Titanic would take a preposterous number of ping pong balls, and given the extent of her damage, one has to wonder how the ping pong balls were meant to stay inside the ship. But the point is moot anyway, because at Titanic's depth, the ping pong balls would be crushed into tiny little wads of plastic and would no longer be buoyant. The fact of the matter is, raising the entire wreck of Titanic just simply isn't possible. It would require technology that we still aren't capable of, and a wreck far less deteriorated than she is today. Essentially, it would require time travel. To salvage the Titanic, you would first have to invent a time machine. Delicate wrecks have been raised in the past, but from much shallower depths than Titanic. The 16th century English warship, the Mary Rose, was painstakingly excavated by a team of divers between 1979 and 1982, with a large section of her hull being salvaged by crane under peak conditions. The 17th century Swedish warship Vasa was also raised through use of divers. Similar to Titanic, ping pong balls and ice cubes had been suggested as a means of raising the ship, but the Swedish salvagers opted instead to dig a series of tunnels in the mud underneath the warship, through which steel cable slings could be threaded to lift the ship. The salvage of both the Mary Rose and Vasa were incredibly expensive and at times dangerous feats. The risks to the divers were considerable. At any point, they could have found themselves trapped or entangled in part of the aging wrecks, or in the case of Vasa, which has sometimes been called Sweden's Apollo mission, they could have been trapped underneath the ship while tunneling underneath. Both wrecks were much, much older than Titanic and probably as or more delicate, but notably, they were located in much shallower waters. Vasa was under only 32 meters of water, and the Mary Rose laid only 12 meters down. Titanic, by contrast, is about 3,800 meters under the Atlantic, more than 1,000 times deeper than Vasa. So we're talking a project roughly 1,000 times more difficult than Sweden's Apollo mission. So, no. Given its location and the deterioration of the wreck, there is simply no way to salvage the entire Titanic. Even the salvage of the big piece, a 15-ton segment of Titanic's hull retrieved by RMS Titanic Inc. in 1998, was an enormous feat. A previous attempt to raise it failed in 1996 when the nylon cables used to raise it snapped, sending the hull section plummeting back to the bottom of the Atlantic. To say nothing of the ethical and legal quandaries that would face RMS Titanic Inc. or anyone who attempted a full salvage of the wreck. The Mary Rose and Vasa had far fewer casualties than Titanic and sank centuries before they were exhumed. Many people consider Titanic a gravesite for the 1,500 lives lost on April 15, 1912, and disturbing her wreck would be tantamount to destroying a burial ground. Even the continued salvage of items from her debris field by RMS Titanic Inc., the exclusive salvage rights holder to the wreck, has come under intense scrutiny. Who owns the wreck of Titanic? Typically, the owners of the ship own the ship. But White Star Line was bought out by Cunard in the 1930s, and Titanic, still undiscovered and totaled at the bottom of the Atlantic, was not part of the sale. So, legal ownership of her was effectively relinquished by the merger in 1934. Marine geologist Dr. Robert Ballard, oceanographer Jean-Louis Michel, and a team of American and French scientists discovered the wreck of Titanic on September 1, 1985. Salvage rights usually come at a first-come, first-served basis, but Ballard declined to take anything from the wreck, recognizing it as the gravesite of over 1,500 people. That essentially meant it was open season for salvagers. Nearly 2 years later, in June of 1987, a commercial salvage operation known as Titanic Ventures Limited Partnership, TLVP, salvaged the first 1,800 objects to be recovered from the ship. This was done despite objections from scientists like Ballard and survivors like Ava Hart, who described it in no uncertain terms as grave looting. TLVP partnered with a French oceanographic institute for this initial salvage operation and entered into an agreement with the French government in 1993 that handed TLVP salvage rights to the wreck, and in exchange, this French collection of artifacts would be brought back to France for curation and conservation and could not be sold off piecemeal. Meanwhile, in the United States, a competing commercial salvage company, Merrick's Inc., sought exclusive salvage rights to the wreck by appealing to the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. This caused TLVP, now restyled as RMS Titanic Inc., RMST, to respond, asserting its rights as an exclusive salvager because they had dibs. And after a series of court cases, RMST was awarded exclusive salvage rights under an agreement with the U.S. government that bound RMST to keep its 5,500-piece American collection, amassed over 30 expeditions, in one piece. So who are RMST? RMST is a private venture, a subsidiary of Premier Exhibitions, which mostly runs touring exhibitions like the Body Exhibit, which displays flayed corpses preserved through a process known as plastination, and has faced considerable criticism and scrutiny over the fact that the bodies sourced were unclaimed and not from willing donors, a fact that Premier Exhibitions has been very upfront about. RMST, the Titanic subsidiary of Premier Exhibitions responsible for the touring Titanic exhibition and 2 permanent exhibits in Las Vegas and Orlando, has its own checkered past. In 2000, RMST ousted its COO, G. Michael Harris, when he was found to be embezzling funds from the company. Notably, before landing at RMST, Harris used to make his money managing comedians and organizing dwarf throwing competitions at Florida bars. He was later found to have illegally offered up Titanic artifacts from the RMST collection as collateral for a $25,000 loan to finance a touring Duck Dynasty exhibit when he was sued for not repaying the loan. In 2004, 7 of RMST's investors were fined $400,000 by the Securities and Exchange Commission for making materially false and misleading statements. One of whom, founder and shareholder Joe Marsh, told the New York Times, "We all know there are billions of dollars down there under the water. It's like sitting on a gold mine, and if we can pull up $1 billion worth of stuff, we are going to figure out how to get $1 billion out of it." The president of RMST in 2000, Arnie Geller, attempted sawing through the hull of Titanic in order to access an alleged $300 million in jewels located in her safe. This plan luckily fell through due to technical problems, and on April 15, 2012, the wreck came under the protection of UNESCO due to a 2001 piece of legislation that protects marine archaeological artifacts that have been underwater for more than 100 years. So, no more sawing into the UNESCO World Heritage Site. In 2016, Premier Exhibitions filed for bankruptcy, and after a failed attempt to sue the French government for the right to sell the French collection, announced that it would auction off the American collection in order to repay its creditors. It placed the starting bid at $19.2 million. In response, an enormous international campaign was launched to raise the money to get the entire collection to the Titanic Museum in Belfast and the UK's National Maritime Museum, to essentially bring Titanic home. The National Geographic Society donated $500,000 toward the mission to repatriate the collection. Feels like they could have given a little more, at least a cool $1 million. And James Cameron and Robert Ballard publicly championed the effort. Sadly, they fell just short of their goal, and 40% of Premier Exhibitions' private stock and the entire American collection were auctioned off to a group of private hedge fund managers. And RMS Titanic Inc.'s shareholders continue to try to squeeze more money out of the wreck. In 2023, the reorganized RMST partnered with Artifact Labs and Venture Smart Financial Holdings to turn each of the 5,500 artifacts into NFTs. But that's not all. Until 2020, RMST had been bound by a court ruling that they not cut into or detach any part of the wreck. But they got U.S. District Judge Rebecca Beach Smith to overturn that so they could cut into the hole and go get the Marconi system that's in Titanic's wireless room. RMST's reasoning that Judge Beach Smith agreed with was that the Marconi system was of historic and cultural significance and should be removed and preserved before the rapid deterioration of the wreck made accessing it impossible. Federal authorities stepped in, noting that RMST's plans violated a treaty signed with the United Kingdom, which recognized Titanic's 2 hull sections as grave sites, and RMST became embroiled in a years-long legal battle with the U.S. government. Eventually, RMST walked back its planned expedition to only include taking images of the wreck and salvaging items from her debris field. But even expeditions to simply survey the wreck have been detrimental to her. In 2020, RMST also got into legal trouble with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, for crashing a submersible into the wreck and failing to report the accident, which highlights the issues with even sending craft down to survey and film the wreck. The hundreds of manned and unmanned dives to Titanic have hastened her deterioration. She is the most studied shipwreck of all time, and I'm certainly glad for the information we've gleaned from her. But are the thousands of scans, photos, filmed footage, and artifacts we've already taken from her not enough? The only real value I can see in continuing to monitor the wreck site would be in the interest of observing her rate of decay, the progress of Halomana's Titanic's ability to break down iron, and the impact of the shipwreck on deep-sea fauna. When it comes to the artifacts down there and the ship itself, I think we have learned all that we ever will, and continued expeditions to the site necessarily come at the cost of the integrity of the wreck and its status as a gravesite. Following the death of RMST's Director of Underwater Research, Paul-Henri Nargeolet, aboard OceanGate's Titan submersible, RMST revised its plans to plunder the wreck once again. They announced that they would only be surveying the wreck. The U.S. government withdrew its legal challenge, and the dive went ahead in September of 2024. All subsequent plans on RMST's part to visit the wreck have been scrapped, and to that I say, good riddance. May we let Titanic rest in peace, and may the hucksters, profiteers, and grave robbers at RMST Titanic Inc. go bankrupt a second time, and may their plunder finally be repatriated. So we can't physically raise Titanic, and there are significant ethical concerns when it comes to salvaging more of her. But what about resurrecting her through recreation? Why don't we do what so many television shows and movies have suggested and just build a Titanic too? Well, an eccentric Australian billionaire is planning on doing just that. Well, he announced his plans around the 100th anniversary of the sinking, and the project has been pretty stagnant since that, but I'm sure it's coming any day now. Clive Palmer is a billionaire mining and real estate magnate who, among other things, attempted and failed to create a dinosaur theme park called Palmersaurus, attempted and failed to manage an Australian football team, and successfully founded the far-right United Australia Party. Hilariously, in March of 2012, Palmer claimed that Barack Obama and the CIA were conspiring to kill the international coal industry. The CIA conspiring to kill coal. Coinciding with his entry into politics, Palmer launched Blue Star Line Cruises, which is really more a website than a travel company because so far their only ship is the as-yet unbuilt Titanic II. Titanic II has remained firmly in the design phase for the last 14 years, with nothing but 3D renderings on the official Blue Star Line website to really show for it, but Clive Palmer is still insistent that the ship is coming. In 2018, he announced that the Finnish-based ship design and marine engineering company Delta Marine was signed on to build the ship. And in a 2024 Rolling Stone interview with Miles Klee, Palmer claimed that Titanic II would be an anti-woke safe space and a COVID vaccine-free environment that will offer an authentic delousing experience for third-class passengers, weather permitting. What the hell, sure. I hope you build your anti-woke Titanic II, Clive Palmer. At least it'll keep you busy and not calling Chinese people slurs or whatever the hell it is you usually do. Another attempt at resurrecting Titanic that's made significantly more progress is the video game Titanic Honor and Glory. Named for the Honor and Glory clock centerpiece of Titanic's grand staircase, the game project was also announced in 2012, and its creators, Vintage Digital Revival, have spent the last decade and a half painstakingly recreating Titanic in digital form. They've released complete deck plans and dozens of animations, including a real-time animation of the sinking. When the project is complete, the game will include a fully rendered, explorable recreation of Titanic. The screenshots that Titanic Honor and Glory has released are truly beautiful. And I think a fully explorable recreation of her is the perfect way to educate and honor her memory, as well as those whose lives were lost on April 15th, 1912. You can check out everything that's been released to the public so far at TitanicHG.com, and you can support their mission at patreon.com/TitanicHG. Titanic has rested 2 miles below the surface of the Atlantic for 114 years, and yet she continues to captivate us, to draw us in. For more than a century, people have dreamed of raising the Titanic. We yearn to see her face to face, perchance to understand her enduring appeal. But why does this enigmatic ship have such a hold on us? Why do we return to the story of Titanic again and again? I'll attempt to unpack that question and stick the landing on this series next time on After Titanic. After Titanic is a podcast by Bashback Productions. Written, recorded, and edited by Amanda Hoopman. Music by Neely Farrell. Artwork by Paul Scott Canavan. Full cast list, transcripts, and sources are available on AfterTitanic.com. After Titanic is supported by our generous Indiegogo backers and patrons. Help support the podcast by heading to patreon.com/AfterTitanic, where you'll get exclusive access to our Discord server and join an entire community of Titanophiles to hang out with between episodes. I've been your host, Amanda Hoopman. Thanks for listening.